Well, thanks again, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing, and to our excellent witnesses, very insightful testimony. Let me start with Mr. Sabalik about your written testimony related to Afghanistan and the impact that our withdrawal from Afghanistan has had in exacerbating this point of testimony that you have that, quote, the United States has proven itself a fickle and unsteady ally. This is concerning to me with regard to U.S. efforts to bring ASEAN countries closer to the United States and drive a wedge between us and the People's Republic of China. I think your point that geographic proximity is not the only problem here. And in the wake of the United States retreat from Afghanistan, we have seen the CCP capitalize on fears that the United States would not honor our obligations to protect our allies and partners. You cite the historical example of the withdrawal from Vietnam as another problem. But how has the Afghanistan debacle affected our credibility with partner nations in the region? And do these ASEAN countries, particularly the Philippines, who have to regularly combat incursions in the South China Sea by China, how do they still view the United States as a legitimate and trustworthy security partner in light of Afghanistan?
Representative Barr, thank you very much for that question. I'll dive into parts of my testimony in responding to you that I wasn't able to share with the full committee earlier on. The fundamental problem that the United States has with our withdrawal from Afghanistan is that we are now largely dependent on China, and to an extent Russia as well, to police the Taliban and to lean on them to crack down on terror groups operating inside of Afghanistan. And to put a really fine point on it, we are relying on other great powers who are adversarial towards us to prevent the next big terrorist attack inside of America, which then imposes significant limitations on our ability to compete effectively with the Chinese Communist Party. And we're seeing some of these dynamics come to fruition, not just because of the lost leverage we have with Afghanistan, but because of this administration's understandable desire to cooperate with the PRC on specific issues like climate change or others. The reality, though, which I believe is becoming clearer, especially in the wake of the United Nations General Assembly speeches, Xi Jinping's commitment to not fund coal manufacturing anymore, how that was a product of John Kerry's negotiations. We're starting to see some give and take and some breaking ground between Washington and Beijing. And my fear is that the cooperative agenda is starting to overtake the competitive one. Now, what this means potentially is, even though we have great defense agreements like AUKUS, we have great things like the Quad on the defense side, on the human rights side and frankly the counterterrorism side, we're losing leverage to the Chinese Communist Party, which makes it difficult for us in the gray zone to actually be active and proactive in defending our Southeast Asian partners day to day.
Thank you for that. And my remaining time, let me just reclaim my time and ask specifically about Singapore to any of our witnesses. As you know, we do have a strong relationship, especially in the economic relationship with Singapore. They are the wealthiest ASEAN member, accounting for 80% of U.S. ASEAN FDI, and the majority of U.S. services exports to and imports from ASEAN countries is Singapore. But it is troubling to hear the Singapore foreign minister talk about viewing China purely as an adversary to be contained will not work in the long term. What can we do? Are there specific areas that the United States can bring Singapore further into the orbit of the United States? How are we seeing Beijing attempt to undermine our relationship? What do we need to do to further integrate our economies to, again, bring them closer to us as opposed to China? How about the ambassador? Could you answer that?
I'd like to take that on, Congressman, because I think it's a fundamentally important question. Our relationship with Singapore is very strong. When we pulled out of the Philippines, the Singaporeans very shrewd, very adroitly, I think, offered us facilities in Singapore to station some of our forces. We continue to have rotational forces in Singapore. Singapore also hosts a Navy logistics command. I think we need to encourage Singapore to cooperate more closely, possibly to host more rotational forces, while recognizing the limitations Singapore's instinct to balance the U.S. and China is. I think we need to push the envelope, but we don't know how far we can go yet.
Which ASEAN country is most likely to be a candidate in the future to join the Quad?
I would, with regards to partnership with the Quad, I think we should put priority on the Philippines, Vietnam, Singapore, and Indonesia. In fact, I think we should put priority on those 4 countries in all of our approaches to ASEAN and Southeast Asia. I think that Philippines may be more likely in the long run, perhaps after President Duterte leaves, to cooperate with the Quad. I think we can elicit gradual, incremental cooperation from Vietnam and Singapore. But we're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to settle for incremental steps, and we're going to have to be adept in the way in which we propose these activities to the Southeast Asians.
I'm just going to say the gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.